So James Cleverly was recently announced as Home Secretary, and the Tories have now come up with the most stupid, ridiculous immigration policy. Now, before we get into this story, I was researching a couple of different articles, and one of them was The Guardian. And when I was reading The Guardian, there was a comment on there which I thought was really, really weird, and it's about the Labour side. Now, I didn't want to talk about the Labour Party. I wanted to talk about the Tories today. However, this comment, which is the first line, is really, really strange. Soon after James Cleverly was announced as the new Home Secretary, one Labour frontbencher expressed surprise at the appointment. "This must be the most liberal Home Secretary we've had in years, including during the Labour years," the person said. I want to know who specifically said that. Like, what a weird thing to say. Like, James Cleverly is not liberal in any way. And it just shows how far to the right Blairism got. It just shows how far to the right the Labour Party is today, to think that James Cleverly is somehow liberal. And then they say, well, he's more liberal than some of our own Home Secretaries. And to be honest, the Blair administration, their Home Secretaries, were pretty damn right wing. But just something I picked up on really, really strange. But let's get into the story. Immigrants coming back to work in care homes will be banned from bringing relatives with them, deterring foreigners from working in the under-pressure sector. Changes to the rules could slash the number of foreigners coming to the UK to work in social care, which is being crippled by an estimated 152,000 vacancies. The amount overseas workers have to pay every year towards the NHS, called the Immigration Health Surcharge, will rocket from 624 to 1,035. I mean, that's huge. International students will not be allowed to bring dependents unless they are on postgraduate courses designated as research programs, said Cleverly. They will also be blocked from quitting their courses and taking jobs before the studies have been completed. Look, I mean, obviously we should encourage people to stay in their courses, but people leave it for a host of reasons. But I think it's really, really strange that they're blocking people from getting work. I mean, we have this sort of like strange dichotomy between, or the Schrodinger's immigrant, I like to say, which is on one hand, immigrants come to this country, take all our jobs. But on the other hand, immigrants come to this country, don't work and seek benefits. Always, when it comes to like right-wing policies, when it comes to immigration, they always make it harder for people to find work. Senior Cabinet Minister Mr. Cleverly was forced to outline details of how the Tories plan to cut net migration after figures showed the level hit an election manifesto busting record 740,000 in 2022. Among measures outlined was a hike in the minimum salaries for skilled workers. Currently, they need to earn at least $26,200 a year to be eligible for a visa, but from next spring, the level will rise to $38,700, making it less attractive for bosses to import staff from abroad. Ministers hoping it will encourage firms to recruit British workers, cutting the numbers of foreign employees. So you have to earn £38,000 a year to stay here. I mean, so many people don't earn that. I don't think I'm ever going to earn that. A lot of carers are on minimum wage, which is £10.42 per hour. A newly qualified nurse is around 28 grand a year. So the idea that someone has to earn £10,000 more than your average newly graduated nurse is ridiculous. And it's so unfair on immigrants. Like, look, if you're going to want to bring in this policy, at least gradually do it. So if you have to earn $26,000 a year to stay here, then think maybe just raise it a little bit. But to change it by £12,000 overnight is just so unfair, and it's so ridiculous. Now, they said the reason why is because they want to import cheap labour. That is a problem. But to make it harder on the workers themselves rather than the bosses isn't the solution, and it's not fair. Now, let's talk about the exploitation of bosses. Now, it's funny because you can sort this out by tougher regulation and unions, which no right-wing party, the Tories have never supported unions. I find it really, really funny that the Tories only care about wages when it comes to immigration. When it's about wages for everything else, they don't give a shit. When it's about striking workers, they don't care. But suddenly, wages are really, really important. Obviously, they don't care about wages. They care about cutting immigration. And I think it's worth noting that all right-wing parties try and tackle the issue without interfering with capitalism. Now, for me, intervening in the economy, the socialist would say, let's support collective bargaining, let's support stronger unions. But the Tories don't want to do that. They don't want to mess up with free market capitalism. So the only thing they will do is just cut immigration and hope that the free market will somehow deliver and offer higher wages for all, which doesn't happen. Now, cutting immigration won't magically boost wages. Right now, we have a staff shortage, and even with the level of immigration we have, which is around 800,000 as of last year, and some might think that's, a high level, why is it that wages haven't dramatically increased? You would think that in a market society, you've got thousands or hundreds of thousands of vacancies, you've got low wages, and you've got a high amount of immigration. Well, then there shouldn't be any vacancies. It just shows, like, how do you square that circle? You square that circle by saying the free market does not deliver. Now, we do have a skills shortage. Yes, we should train up British workers. But again, given the amount of vacancies, the priority to cut immigration is so ludicrous. But this isn't out of necessity. This is just the Tories trying to rile up their base and try and increase their support. You also have to be mindful, right, that for years and years and years, the Tories have said, we want to cut immigration down to the tens of thousands. That is likely never, ever going to happen. It's probably not even likely that we're going to cut immigration by half or down to something like 200,000. Why is that? Because we are living under global capitalism. We are a more integrated world. To get immigration down to tens of thousands is a pipe dream. And it's funny because the political right moan about immigration, but who are the biggest proponents of capitalism? It's the right. So don't moan about the system if you don't support the negative effects of it. Now, let's talk about the negative effects of immigration. The University of Oxford did a study where they wanted to see the effects on wages due to immigration, and basically, it doesn't. In 2018, the Migration Advisory Committee reviewed the results of studies conducted between 2003 and 2018, which that is quite a long time, and drew 3 conclusions. First, immigration had little or no impact on average employment or unemployment of existing workers. Second, where an impact was found, it was usually concentrated among certain groups, i.e. a negative effect for those with lower education and a positive effect for those with higher levels of education. And third, the impact may depend on the economic cycle. Some, though not all, studies have found adverse effects on employment or unemployment specifically during downturns. Similarly, the MAC review concluded that immigration had little impact on average wages, according to previous research. Some studies have found a small negative impact on average wages, while others found positive average effects. So basically, it doesn't really make a difference. Of course, there's going to be an upswing and downswing. That is what happens with the economy, and especially in a market economy. Now, I have noticed that a lot of people, even on this channel, talk about supporting reform. They like them. Reform have seen their party surge. I want to make it clear to you, the Reform Party are not your friend. So this is a clip of Richard Tice, who went on BBC Newsnight, and it is him talking about immigration.
This is a mass immigration crisis of the Tory party's own making. They promised to take back control of our borders. They promised to reduce immigration in the last manifesto. They've betrayed the people who voted for them. That's why so many more people are now starting to say they're going to vote for reform. But here's the point. These proposals today, they're not going to come into force until next spring. That means there's going to be a surge of immigration between now and then. But also look back at the 1990s, right? When we didn't have mass immigration, we had net immigration of about 100,000 a year. We had real wage growth of about 2.8% per annum. We didn't have a health and social care crisis. And
but we're an ageing population. We have lots of problems we didn't have.
So that's why you need higher wages and to train our own people so that you're going people back into work. Christine's right that domestic wages are way too low because we've imported cheap, low-skilled overseas labour for far too long. We've become dependent on it.
Now, you'd think that the leader of a smaller party would come up with something new, but no, it is the same. It's the same old trope of high immigration depresses wages. As I've literally pointed out, this isn't true. Now, if you think reform is going to make things better, I'm sorry, it's just not the case. Richard Tice never talks about union busting or corporate greed. You think he cares about you? Do you think he cares about workers? He doesn't. Now, in that clip, he does speak about how the 90s were better because back in the 90s, wages were higher, immigration was lower. Correlation isn't necessarily causation. In the 90s, the economy was doing far better. We also hadn't had 14 years of Tory austerity and anti-union laws. Just think, why is our NHS at breaking point? Why are our public services going down the drain? It is so easy for politicians who aren't interested in fixing anything, and their loyalty, or their only loyalty, is to their donors, to blame immigration. It's beneficial to the capitalist class. There has been a long radical history of workers standing in solidarity with immigrant workers. Unions have done it because a united labour force is bad news for capitalists. It doesn't matter what colour, skin, what race, what creed, or where you're from. If workers stand together, that is good for the workers. But in order to distract you, let's just blame immigration. And it works because immigration hasn't gone down. So they've got like almost a constant scapegoat, right? And they can go on and on and on because immigration isn't going to come down. It's just not going to happen. It might come down a little bit, but it's very unlikely it's going to come down by a lot because that is the world we live in. And I think some Tories know this. I think some on the political right know this. So it's almost like they will forever have something to blame. Now, they could invest. They could tax the wealthy. They could support workers taking back control, but they don't. The Tories, nor Reform, or even the Labour Party are on your side. This plan for the Tories is stupid. It's going to leave a lot of people behind. It's going to mess with so many people. They don't know the effects on the economy. It's going to be bad. There's going to be more vacancies. Our public services are going to get worse. But you know what? They're doing it because they are so desperate. But just please don't fall for it. I mean, I feel like that liberals, and obviously the left, we adopt this argument too, have talked about this for a long time. I mean, it's not a new argument when we say immigrants aren't to blame. It's those that are paying you. But we've had this discussion for decades and nothing's really changed, but it's still correct. So I'm still going to continue to make this argument. I really hope that if you are skeptical, please just don't look at other parties. Don't look at Reform and the Tories think they're going to solve your problems. They're not. Your enemy has and always will be those that exploit your labour.